Hey there, ready for a deep dive?
Absolutely.
Today we're tackling feedback.
And not just the good job kind, right?
Right, like the stuff that actually helps people grow.
And that maybe even makes people a little uncomfortable, right?
Yeah, exactly. But we've got research, insights, even some data.
Yeah, we're going to try to unpack all of that.
I feel like we've all had that moment where someone says, "Do you have any feedback?" And then everyone just kind of stares at their shoes.
Oh, yeah.
Why is feedback so rare?
We call that the feedback desert. It's actually backed by some really wild data.
Okay.
Studies show that 73% of employees feel like they don't get enough praise or recognition.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is. And then on the flip side, almost 60% of managers admit they're uncomfortable giving constructive feedback.
That's way more than I would have thought.
Yeah,
So it's like we're living in this feedback drought.
we are.
But why?
Why is that?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, fear is a big part of it, right? But also, there's a huge lack of confidence.
Yeah, I get that. Like, how do you even do it right?
Right. Like, how do you do it in a way where you don't hurt somebody's feelings? And, I think that's a big part of the reason why people avoid it.
So how do we get out of this feedback desert?
That's a good question. We need to change how we think about feedback. I mean, instead of seeing it as criticism, we should see it as a way to grow, a way to improve.
Yeah.
And that starts by understanding that its main purpose is to encourage good behavior going forward.
So it's not about dwelling on the past.
No.
Yeah.
It's about helping people, learn and get better.
So focusing on the future.
Exactly.
So how do you actually deliver feedback in a way that's, helpful and not harmful?
Well, there's no magic formula, but there is a really simple 4-step model that we can use to make it less of a burden.
Okay, I'm listening. Break it down for me.
All right. Step 1, and this might surprise you, is to ask permission.
Ask permission. Really? Like, can I give you some feedback?
Yeah, it might seem a little formal.
It does.
But it really shows respect. And it makes sure that the person is actually ready to hear what you have to say.
So you're saying, like, check in first.
Right. Because if somebody is, super stressed or just not in the right headspace, it doesn't matter how good your feedback is, they're probably not going to be receptive to it.
That's a good point. All right, so check in, ask permission. What's next?
Okay, step 2 is all about describing the specific behavior you want to talk about.
Okay.
And this is super important. You need to focus on things that you can actually observe. Actions, not some vague idea about their attitude.
So instead of saying, you have a bad attitude, I'd say something like, when you were late to the meeting.
Exactly. You stick to the facts. Things that you both can agree on.
Got it.
No assumptions, no judgments.
Okay, so far we've got ask permission, describe the behavior. What's next?
Step 3 is all about connecting that behavior to its impact. Explain how those actions affected, you, the team, the project.
So I could say, when you were late to the meeting, we lost valuable time.
Perfect. You're drawing that clear line, right? The action and its consequence.
Got it. Okay. Ask permission, describe the behavior, explain the impact. What's the final step?
Step 4 is all about what you want to see happen in the future. So for positive feedback, it could be as simple as, I really appreciate your attention to detail. Keep it up.
And for, more corrective feedback.
Right. You want to phrase it more like a request, not a demand. So something like, next time, could you try to be 5 minutes early so we can start on time?
Okay. So you're not telling them what to do, but kind of encouraging them to find their own solution.
Exactly. We want to help them build those problem-solving skills.
That makes sense. This model sounds pretty straightforward. But does it work the same way for everyone?
That is a great question. And honestly, a one-size-fits-all approach to feedback, it doesn't really work. People have different communication styles, motivations, different sensitivities.
Yeah, that's true.
So we need to tailor our feedback to the individual.
Okay. So how do we do that?
Yeah.
Is there a framework that we can use?
There is. One helpful one is called DISC. It basically breaks down personalities into 4 main types.
Okay, wait, hold on. For those of us who aren't familiar with DISC, can you give us a quick rundown?
Yeah. So think of it as a way to quickly understand people's communication preferences.
Okay.
So we have dominant types, or Ds. They're very direct, assertive, and focused on results.
So a D would probably appreciate just straight up feedback.
Exactly. No sugarcoating.
Got it.
Then we have influencers, or Is. They're all about relationships, enthusiasm, collaboration.
So for an I, it might be more effective if it's positive and encouraging.
You got it.
Okay.
Then we have steady types, or S's. They value stability, harmony, and supporting others. They're sensitive to criticism. So a gentle, supportive approach is really important.
Okay.
Then we have the conscientious types, or Cs. They're all about accuracy, details, following the rules.
Got it. So for a C, feedback should be clear, specific, and, well, accurate.
Exactly. No vague generalities.
Okay. I think I'm starting to get this. So how do we use these personality types to actually tailor the feedback? Like, can you give us a real-world example?
Yeah. Let's say we have someone who's consistently missing deadlines. Let's call him John. Let's play out how we might approach this with each DISC style.
Okay, let's do it. Let's start with a D.
Yeah.
How would we approach John if he's a dominant personality?
Okay, remember, Ds are direct and results-oriented, right? So after asking permission, you could say something like, John, when you turn in work late, it impacts the whole project timeline. We need you to be on time. What can you change so this doesn't happen again?
Wow, that's direct.
It is. But what if John is an I, an influencer?
Okay, how would that sound?
Well, with an I, you want to focus on the positive and the collaborative aspects, right? You might say something like, John, you're so passionate about this project and I love your enthusiasm. But when deadlines are missed, it makes it harder for the team to stay on track. Let's brainstorm some ways to make sure we hit those targets together. What ideas do you have?
Okay, that's a lot softer, more encouraging.
Right. It acknowledges his strengths while still addressing the issue.
Okay, I like it. What about an S? A steady type. How would we talk to John about this if he was an S?
Right. So S's are all about harmony and support. So we want to be gentle and reassuring. We could say something like, John, I've noticed that some deadlines have been slipping lately, and I know you're always willing to help out, but is there anything we can do as a team to help you stay on top of things and prevent these delays?
Okay, that's very supportive, very non-confrontational.
Exactly. What about our last type, the C, the conscientious one?
Okay, how would we talk to John about missing deadlines if he was a C?
So with a C, it's all about data and logic, right? So you would say something like, John, I've noticed a pattern of missed deadlines on these last few projects. For example, on Project X, the deadline was Y, but you submitted it on Z. This makes it tough to accurately track progress. Can you walk me through your process for managing deadlines, and maybe we can find some areas to improve?
Okay, that's very specific, very focused on finding a solution. I'm really starting to see how, even with the same message, the delivery can completely change things.
Right.
So what about that thing that's been happening lately where people have these deep dialogues about every little mistake? Is that really helping, or are we just overthinking things?
You know, a lot of times those long dialogues can actually do more harm than good.
Really? Why?
Well, I always thought it was important to get to the root of the problem. Understanding the why can be helpful, but it's not always necessary.
Okay.
Sometimes spending hours analyzing every single mistake leads to analysis paralysis.
That's a good point.
So it's all about finding the right balance between understanding the situation and encouraging people to move forward.
So not getting bogged down in the past.
Right. Remember, the whole goal is to encourage better behavior in the future.
You know, I've definitely been guilty of overanalyzing things.
Yeah, it's a common trap.
But focusing on the behavior, the impact, and what we want to see going forward.
Exactly. That can make it much more effective for everyone.
I'm starting to see how powerful this simple model can be.
Mm-hmm.
And especially when you adapt it to different personality types. Is there anything else that we should keep in mind when giving feedback?
You know, one important thing that we haven't really talked about yet is that sometimes the most effective feedback happens in the moment. You know, informally, not in some formal setting.
You mean like casual, on-the-fly kind of feedback?
Exactly. It is. And it can be surprisingly effective because you're addressing the behavior, like, right away.
Yeah.
You know, while it's still fresh in everyone's mind.
Okay, so can you give me an example? Like, how would this work, you know, in real life?
Okay, sure. Let's say you have a teammate, Sarah, who just gave a fantastic presentation during a client meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And as you're walking back to your desks, you could just casually say something like, Hey, Sarah, that was a killer presentation. You explained those complex concepts so clearly, and you really kept everyone engaged. Great job.
I like that. It's like a mini celebration.
Exactly, and it reinforces that positive behavior.
I like that. Okay, so what about those times where you need to give, you know, feedback for improvement? Can we do that casually too?
We can.
Okay, good. Because I was just thinking about that.
Yeah.
Like, let's say someone has a habit of interrupting others during meetings.
Mm-hmm.
How would you address that casually without being confrontational?
Well, you could catch them right after the meeting and say something like, hey, I noticed you had some really great ideas in there. Just a quick thought. I think you'll be even more effective if you let people finish their thoughts before jumping in.
Okay.
What do you think?
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
I really like that.
Yeah.
Because it feels more like a friendly suggestion.
Exactly.
And not a criticism.
And by asking, what do you think, you're inviting them to reflect on their behavior and be part of the solution.
This whole idea of casual feedback is really clicking with me.
Ugh.
It makes it feel less like a big scary thing.
Exactly. It just becomes part of your regular conversation.
Yeah.
And honestly, the more you practice it, the more comfortable you'll get and the better you'll be at giving and receiving feedback.
Yeah. It's like a muscle, right?
It is.
The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
Exactly.
This deep dive has really changed my perspective.
I'm glad.
I feel like I have a whole new toolkit now.
It's been great sharing these insights with you. And remember, mastering feedback, it's a journey, not a destination. So just keep practicing, keep experimenting, keep those feedback loops open.
I like that. So as we wrap up, is there one final thought-provoking question that we can leave our listeners with?
Yeah. How about this? What if we stopped thinking about feedback as something we give to others and instead thought about it as something we create together? What if we shifted from, telling to exploring?
That's a really interesting shift.
It is.
Because it makes it more collaborative.
Exactly. And that's how you build a culture of continuous improvement, right? Where everyone feels empowered to learn, grow, and really contribute.
That's a great point. That's a perfect way to wrap up. Thank you so much for joining us today on this deep dive into the world of feedback.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
We hope that these insights and strategies help you transform the way you communicate.
Yeah.
And create a more positive and productive environment for yourself and everyone around you.
Couldn't agree more.
Until next time, keep diving deep.
Keep diving.